bachelor's degree in fine art. She's exhibited in the National Portrait Gallery in London and had several portrait commissions auctioned by Christie's of London to fundraise for a major charity. Greer, your figurative work is extremely popular. It's been bought by collectors in the UK and abroad, including well-known business and sports personalities. Unfortunately, I don't think it's wise to ask Greer who they are on camera, but I am going to do so over a glass of wine afterwards and see if I know any of them. That aside, in the last few years, Greer's interests have shifted from figurative and equestrian to large-scale flower paintings, taking you down a new route of colour and expression, and influenced in part by artists such as Georgia O'Keeffe and Rachel Bush. So, that is Greer Ralston. So, first of all, Lindsey, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about your experience of art.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could tell me a bit more about what first inspired you to become an artist.
I always loved drawing and painting, and I was good at it at school, and really enjoyed it. Wanted to do art as a career, and was encouraged to do architecture instead as a sort of more serious job. So I don't regret that, but that wasn't my first choice. So yeah.
Okay, so when did you discover that you, I guess partly through architectural practice, partly through the art that you were doing in your spare time, when did that tip from being perhaps more of a hobby into, you know what, I think I can actually do this on a professional basis?
Probably after my career break to have the kids, I started doing evening classes, really just to maintain sanity. I'd always done art in my spare time, but I just continued to do that. And then the staff there were so supportive and suggested I put work in for exhibitions, and always talked as if we would exhibit work, and not that it would just stay in the folder, So I think that was when I got work into one of the SSA exhibitions, and I think that was a real turning point for me.
Yeah, good. Okay. I'm going to tear up the agenda a bit now because I want to bring Greer in at this point, because I still think that there is a lot more in common between you guys than might be obvious from the types of work that you do. So Greer, I guess same kind of question for you. You've had more of perhaps a traditional art career by going through the degree route and then into painting. Is that fair?
Yeah, pretty much straight from school.
Yeah.
Which is something I actually do regret. I wish I had taken a year two instead of going to art school right away. I think just it would be good to go in a bit older rather than 18, but I've always enjoyed it as a child, and right from an early age. I think someone gave me a watercolour set when I was about 5 or something like that, a professional watercolour set, which was fantastic to use. I've always drawn a lot, and as a kid, I think it's 11, 12, I became obsessed by Michelangelo, which was a strange thing for a sort of teenage kid to be involved with. I think from then on I just was really obsessed by figurative work and drawing all the time. And I've always drawn a lot, and then won some school art prizes and things, and then realised this was something I was actually quite good at. And, so I was quite focused from an early age, right, I would go to art school and do that, and that would be very much, I think probably my parents might have hoped I might have taught or something like that, rather than believe that you could be a painter, I think. And in those days for a girl as well, I think there was more emphasis on women getting a teaching job. You're talking sort of 80s, 70s, 80s, that sort of thing. It was all like, okay, a career rather than be a painter, which is way different now, thankfully. But yeah, from an early age, I think I was just quite set on doing that, doing the traditional route.
So I think we've spotted one parallel there between the two, which is a degree of dedication and an understanding that if you wanted to do something, you had to really go for it and press for it. And also, I guess to a degree, Greer, you being expected to move into what was at the time a man's world, and Lindsey, very much I expect architectural practice was heavily male dominated when you started on style. So I know a few architects. Yeah. So Greer, tell me a little bit more about, having gone through art school, when did you realise that, okay, now I've kind of done the educational bit, I've done some of the technical bit, I know that I've enjoyed painting and drawing beforehand. How do I move from getting a degree to selling what I'm doing?
I
I think, I don't know if it was a mistake, because I don't always regret things, but because I was figurative, I ended up painting portraits after I left. And the problem with that is, you're getting loads of commissions and you're making a living from it, but they're hanging up in people's houses and no one really knows who you are.
Yeah.
So although I was making a living from it, it did take me out of the gallery system. So looking back, I think I'd rather maybe just sort of concentrated on figure rather than portrait, instead of doing commissions, or so many commissions. So I ended up sort of by default getting into teaching, and I lectured for 25 years. And I lectured for a college, and I lectured in different groups and things like that as well, which was great. And I met loads of nice people, and it was wonderful. But I do remember when I hit the 50 mark, which is a few years ago, and just sitting there in the staff room thinking, right, that's it, I've had enough. It was just that sort of, they gave me a permanent contract, and I'm on a computer, and I thought, no, I couldn't do this. I'm going to go for it. And I did. I just thought, no, I'm going to do this full time, because I felt like I was exhibiting partly and teaching partly. And, I just thought, no, I have to make a move to be brave enough to do it, and I just went for it.
That's yet another parallel in terms of bravery, giving up one thing and starting another. So Lindsey, perhaps you could shed some light on. But tell us how you felt when you finally made that decision and said, stuff this. I've mostly enjoyed, I hope, doing architectural practice, and then appreciate with the career break you had the opportunity to think again. But describe what it felt like when you said to yourself, right, that's it, I'm not going back to the office, I know what I really want to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure it happened as kind of smoothly as that. I think I realised I didn't want to go back into architecture, which was terrifying because I'd spent 10 years training, and then I was at home with the kids, and I started doing the art classes really because the kids were messing my brain up really, and I felt I needed to be drawing again. And that just, I just started exhibiting, and I didn't really plan it, so it just built, and I thought, this is what I'm going to do instead. But it was quite scary.
A bit of a leap into the unknown for both of you. So Lindsey, I want to take it a little bit onto structure. This is a question I've been looking forward to talking to both of them about, because I do think there's a lot of similarities in some of the, I guess, formulation of how you put your images together, how you put your paintings together. And so I want to start with you. So obviously coming from an architectural background, but painting really quite everyday objects in the built environment. I appreciate with an architectural background, someone might be attracted to lines and perspective and structure. How did you light upon the idea, the concept of combining your love for drawing with your architectural practice and thinking, well, if I like painting this, then maybe other people will like it too? It's very unusual.
Well, I think I'd always drawn buildings because I was in architecture, I was sketching buildings. We'd go on sort of tours and visits and things like that, and I would sketch the buildings that I was in. But when I started doing painting, I was really determined not to drag architecture into it, because that was kind of behind me. So I was really trying not to, and then structures would just creep into the pictures. There'd be sort of a landscape, and then there'd be this really strong fence work coming in. And eventually I just thought, I can't deny this, it's just a thing that I'm interested in. I love those kind of repeated lines and the shadows that you get. And so I just get into it and accept that was what I was doing.
But here's where I see the parallel, because Greer, the way in which you build up your paintings is quite interesting. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that with reference to structure and shadow.
I think, like Lindsey was saying, I think drawing is a key thing. I think I was drawing a lot as well. I tend to sketch things out first and then do much looser oil sketches. But with the bigger oil paintings, I tend to be quite traditional. Instead of doing tonal underpaintings and then sort of pull fat or lean sleeve a tonal underpainting, let it dry, then put thicker paint on, and then on top of that, after that's dry, you can put as many as 20, 30 glazes and try and use the lights and darks and make it really three-dimensional. And I think the flowers that you seem to try to avoid doing something, and it came about with someone actually daring me to say it's never paint flowers. Oh, don't be stupid, far too twee for me. It's always been figure and things like that. And I thought, actually, you look at it, I'm a big fan of Keith's life rather than necessarily work. But I thought what she does do is she puts them on a big scale, she makes them quite monumental. And I did also study sculpture as well as drawing and painting. I finished in drawing and painting, but I took time off and did quite a lot of sculpture. So I kind of wanted them to be bigger and sculptural and not twee and not domestic and I was say not feminine. I don't know if that's the right thing to say, but I wanted them to have power, you know, so it's almost like you had an insect crawling through them. So in that sense, they're quite structural in the same way that you're taking something like a building and the fact you isolate it makes people just all of a sudden look at it. You know?
I'm going to go out on a limb here. It's probably a very tenuous limb that's going to break underneath me. But Georgia O'Keeffe was a sponsor of and a big supporter of Yale Kasama, I think. And obviously Kasama structure, lines and dots, mainly the dots, the polka dots, and interest in the ways in which objects were put together and how they related spatially to each other. Do you see any link? And I really go down a path there. Do you see any link between your interest in O'Keeffe and her life and her interest in Kasama?
I think the biggest parallel I've got with O'Keeffe is I have a kind of tendency to, we were just chatting about it earlier, I've got a place in the country that I'm moving back out to its old stables, and it used to be horses and show jumping things. So we're brought up in the country, it was quite isolated. And of course I've lived in Glasgow, lived in towns and cities, and I think the parallel I always feel with her is that need to get away from people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm quite sociable and I do run classes and chat to people, then it's that need to just disappear. So although I love figure is the main thing of my work, the flowers are like a sort of meditation, it's like a safety thing that I go back to. But I see them in a structural sense.
Yeah.
So I'm just desperate to move back out to the country, and I'm in the process of building a studio, then I'm going to build a cabin. And a friend of mine who's a painter who died, big time cows, and I've got all these dozens of huge big skulls, and she collected skulls, which is it's like a Scottish O'Keeffe. So I'm doing a sort of corrugated iron mould with a homage to O'Keeffe with all these big skulls. And recently I've been painting skulls as well. So I think it's more kind of rural, isolated, ghost ranchy Scottish version. It's where the link comes.
So I'm seeing I'm drawing a narrative line here between figurative, so people that theoretically are alive, through to flowers, which is what someone presents at a funeral, through to skulls. So this could go quite dark.
I'm actually going to combine two in my new work, so I don't know how that's going to work. So it's going to be quite, I'm determined to, I have done a couple of paintings that have fused flowers with people, but the flowers do fascinate me because we use them as a celebration, we use them as funerals, you know, and I think there's a lot more to flowers than just painting a bowl of flowers. They're quite symbolic. So I think there's a lot of symbolism in them, and that really attracts me. Sometimes the darker side and sometimes the happier sides. Sometimes I've just got to get away from people and painting people. Because I did a show with 4 women and it was all about their journeys, there was death, cancer, all sorts of things in there, and hip replacements and all sorts. And I just had to get away and paint flowers because I thought I could, that's, so yeah, it's just, but they are, I see them as big structures.
So Lindsey, talk to me about light and shade in your pieces, because they're not only about the structures that you see in the built environment, but also there's very specific applications of the ways in which the light moves through those structures. And it's not just the light as well, it's the absence of the light. So very interesting to learn what you're trying to achieve through that. What's the sort of process there?
Well, I think one of the sort of drama of seeing, you know, some kind of structure that you pass every day that is banal, nobody looks at it, and sometimes I just stop in my tracks and everybody's walking past and there's this bit of something lit up and I have to sort of stop and take pictures of it and sketch it. It's just, I can't kind of resist it, I get ambushed by these things. So it's kind of wanting to get that over in a painting, that, you know, this kind of little glimmers of something positive or sometimes really something negative. It just depends how I'm feeling and how it's falling. But yeah, just things that people don't seem to notice. I really enjoy kind of the the kind of poetry and the drama of them.
Would you be particularly attracted then to post-industrial environments, so where there's a degree of urban decay, where perhaps the environment is moving from one state to another? Maybe it's an old factory where that industry is declined.
Definitely, yeah. I kind of love that sort of history side of things, that places that were bustling and busy are now kind of derelict, or sometimes they've been repurposed and it's kind of all been used for artist workshops and things like that. So I quite like that sort of, the fact that that building stays the same through time. And the same with the sort of concrete structures that they were put up in the 60s, and that we still use them every day. They haven't changed at all, but the sort of people and the surroundings are all new and different. Really.
So if you were to choose different styles of architecture, say from the Georgian townhouses and areas of Edinburgh to the more brutalist concrete realism of the South Bank in London, where would you go? Where do you find or what is your inspiration for particular styles of architecture? It doesn't have to be houses.
Probably this sort of brutal concrete stuff is more appealing to me. I really like the way that gets transformed and the way, I don't know, you can just see something different. The Georgian architecture does it as well, but that's sort of pretty to look at anyway, and it's people appreciate it, whereas the sort of concrete road bridges, nobody looks at them, they sort of pull their car up and trudge past, and they don't notice the sort of the light across it. I'm just mesmerised by it, so yeah.
I think one of the things that it's always interesting to do when you're walking down a street or somewhere in an urban environment is to look up. And one of the challenges, particularly today, is shop front signage. Because we see all these beautiful shop fronts with fabulous displays that are designed to attract attention, to draw you in. And I think what's interesting about your work, Lindsey, is that you're asking us to say, look, forget the shiny stuff over there, there's more interesting stuff up there or around the corner or down that particular road.
I think that does come from architecture as well, because we were always told to stop and look up, and that's just the kind of thing that architects do. They notice things that are going on in facades that are above this eye level, and I think that's the thing that was drummed into us very early on in architecture. Always look up. So,
And believe me, one of my best friends is a building services engineer. I have to tear him away from any building that's got a bit of ductwork on the outside. My also have a friend who's a geologist, and taking him to the beach is just ridiculous. In any case, Greer, could you tell us a little bit more about how you create your composition with the flowers? And you spoke a little bit about layers of varnishing, getting the depth through the ways in which you construct them. But take us back a step to the beginning. How do you choose a particular subject, and then how does it evolve from that initial impression to the final finished piece?
I tend to listen to sort of do sketches, maybe use watercolours, and can just draw for a bit until I get shapes. And I like combing in and just bits of watercolour sometimes and having bursting out the page, so they are almost like pieces of sculpture and sort of. And I try as much as possible in the initial stages to work from the flower as it is. Obviously, the time you go into big painting, the flower's going to die. But in the initial stages, I'll do watercolour, loose watercolours, charcoals, and then I move on to some oil sketches, just to try and capture the life. So I make sure the flower is there initially, if I can, and then take some photographs and then move up onto a big canvas. So I might do it from different angles and things like that, and different lighting on it. Just play around with light and dark as well to get the drama. So I'll do maybe sometimes 3-4 studies and then onto a big canvas afterwards. Sometimes I try just to go straight on, but you know, if you've got something to the last couple of weeks, there's no way your petals are all going to start falling. But as much as possible, just to get the feel of the flower to begin with, and almost like an insect falling into it. And I like getting the spotlight. I might decide even when I'm painting just to do studies so I can literally see inside it and get the feel for it. Almost in some ways like a piece of architecture, it's like a see inside the actual form of it as well.
Yeah, thank you, because that just builds on the point about the structure and the similarities both out there. But same question goes to number 2. I guess, Lindsay. So, could you talk us through your process, or your composition process, once you've found something that you think is an interesting subject?
Yeah, usually I'll take a load of photographs and do some sketches on site, and then look at it from all different angles and just see exactly, test out different sort of, draw it at different scales and do study size paintings just to test out whether it works or not, whether the composition needs to be different, and then take it up to a larger scale. So yeah, similar sort of process really.
Okay. I'd like to turn our attention to slightly different forms of art now, and talk to you guys about music. So, do you listen to music? Do you get inspired by other forms of art before you, or during your the process? So, Greer, perhaps I want to talk to you.
Yeah, quite taste in music, I think it depends who I'm feeling as well. Someone hears Beethoven belt out from the studio with no note to come near me. If it's going badly, the music's a bit dramatic, then, and then other times I just play really cheesy country western, Johnny Cash, crazy stuff, Or I've got a friend in the States who's a sort of folk country singer called Diana Jones, who her songs are all about real situations and real people and what's happened to them. There's a lot of stuff to do with refugees, things like that. So I really love her stuff, and we met up and things like that. So, it's quite a sort of folky, and that's a very earthy kind of feel to it. So it just depends on the mood of it. Honestly, it can be very light, and I do like listening to classical music when I'm working, and I think music does affect you quite a bit. It really does alter your mood. So, it's, and I like painting into the night as well. I tend to paint into 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. It's quite nice just to have something else, some music playing. Just kind of, but it does affect you quite a bit. I think that's. If I'm happy that it's going okay, then everything's fine. It'll be something really cheesy. But if it's not going okay, then it's kind of heavy classical. So it just depends. It depends who the work's going. If it's going really badly.
So, but on a scale of Beethoven's Fifth, the Eroica, to Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, just better.
Yeah. just walk up the path, listen to what's getting else you do, and turn away again.
What about you, Lindsay?
Well, there's always music on in the house, quite often not mine though, so it's my husband has the workshop next door, so it's quite often his music that's on quite loud, so I listen to that, but if it's up to me, probably some Amy Winehouse. If things are going wrong, I have to have all switched off, just like, what am I doing? So yeah, different.
Okay. Before we go any further, I'd like to open the chat up to you both. What would you like to ask either Greer or Lindsay, or indeed both? You don't have to think of something on the spot, guys. Lavender.
Yeah, I've got a question for Greer. Have you ever thought of moving from paintings to sculpture itself for flowers?
Yeah, I have thought about going back. It does pull me quite a bit, to be honest. I've done bits and pieces over the years. I did some stone carving when I was younger as well. I don't know, once I moved to this place in the countryside, I've got kind of ideas for sculptures and the garden and things. So, yeah, I kind of see sculptures more therapeutic, if that makes sense, because it's more physical. So I get less intellectually caught up in it. I think I get too intense when I'm painting. So yeah, it would be nice to go back to sculpture, to be honest. It has crossed my mind in quite a few. Yeah, it might come, it might be something like that may happen, but it's certainly, I always found it physically something that was better, that I got less intense in my head. But I think when you're painting, especially if you're on smaller pieces, can actually be worse. I mean, big pieces are quite visible, but smaller pieces you can feel your shoulders get up and you can get quite too intense and too tight with it. So definitely a piece of sculpture is a relaxation would be good.
Lindsay, what about yourself? Do you see yourself, or are you experimenting with other art forms? I mean, for instance, from an architectural background, you have whole making experience.
I've never thought of doing sculpture, but I do enjoy kind of looking at other people's sculptures, so maybe that's something I should think about. But yeah, model making I loved when I was a student. Yeah. Didn't do much of that in practice either.
Really? That's a shame.
Yeah.
Because I could certainly see something quite interesting in terms of models of some of your paintings.
And it's worth a thought actually, yeah.
Can I just add similar question, I suppose? Sorry. Have you ever sort of worked with softwares that you've probably used as from your architect career for your paintings as well?
So
or?
old, I didn't really use software. It started to head that direction. That's one of the things I didn't really like, was that there was no hand drawing anymore. But,
like CAD drawings and God knows all those
I did a
fancy
little bit of CAD,
softwares.
but really just flat drawings. I didn't really get into sort of 3D rendering or that side of it.
Would you want to?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Feeling a bit of negativity towards it. You know.
I was interested in saying your features in architecture keep coming into your painting. Is there any way you'd want to stop them or change? Do you want to change completely to anything else? Are you quite happy that it come in? Or?
I think it changes gradually over time, and it kind of shifts from one sort of thing to another. And I'm quite happy with the way that sort of fluidity that it does move, and it'll switch over from one subject to another subject, and it's quite dynamic and it moves itself. So I'm not really wanting to stop and do a different sort of subject at all. No, I'm quite happy for it to move.
I know as an artist I'm constantly frustrated. I want to paint in a different way or different things, but the same things come back, and I just have to accept this is me, this is how I paint, this is what keeps coming out. So that was interesting when you said that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've just got a couple more questions left for you guys, and then what we'll do is we'll take a break at that point, and if you want to talk to Lindsey or Greer one-on-one, please feel free to do so. So, Chris, I'd like to just ask you about your inspirations, your art heroes, if I could put it that way, or even your architectural heroes as well. Greer, perhaps I could start with you. Who inspires you? Who do you look to?
I think I've had so many different people over the years. As I said earlier, as a kid I became obsessed by Michelangelo and into figure drawing, and was really lucky before I went to art school. I had some people to model for me, and so when I went with a portfolio I already had life drawing at the age of 17, and I think that's something that's kept going. So I kind of then naturally progressed to people like Lucian Freud, Francis Bacon, people like that. But then over the years it's changed quite a bit. But then I jump about inspirational wise, I look back at the old masters, and I'm quite cautious about looking at contemporary artists, because I think sometimes as an artist when producing work, if you look at too much of what's happening around about you, it can just it can jangle your head, and you can lose your vision of where you want to go. You know, much as I love seeing other people's work, sometimes I tend to look back for me. And I've got a huge interest in women artists, because when I was about 19, 20, I was in Paris and discovered Camille Claudel, and I did a dissertation on women artists, so I do a lot of talks on women artists. So when you go back to Gentileschi and all these people, and I'm quite passionate that, especially when I was teaching at college, that young women were aware of this history of women artists behind them, because so much of it still isn't taught. You know, I think that's the problem with women's art history. We've come back in the 80s when I was studying it, and I had people like Jeremy Greer who helped me, which was phenomenal. It was quite difficult. But I think she only kind of helped me because we shared the same name, but you know, I kind of had to do what I was told a wee bit. But even back then in the 80s, I had to really search to get a tutor from Glasgow University to help me, because there was no one in the art school to touch women artists. You know, it wasn't even included in the women's art history, the art history that were being taught. So I had to go looking for it, which is vastly different nowadays. But people, you know, in general, people are still not aware. If you ask someone to name a well-known women artist, a lot of people won't. So that's something I'm quite passionate about. So I do look back historically. So I'm quite influenced by people like Caravaggio, Rembrandt, and I kind of like to go back and look at their techniques, but try and do it in a contemporary way, if that makes sense. Because I'm cautious of looking at other artists that are contemporary to me, because I think you can just start to think, gosh, it's not like mine, or you know. So I purposely avoid anyone who's looking at stuff that's similar to mine, because it's important to kind of get your essence and not get muddied by other people. So I do keep looking back, but I do keep going back to the masters.
Fair enough. And Lindsey, inspirations?
Very similar actually. Caravaggio is obviously the very sort of like dark chiaroscuro was always something that I loved, and Vermeer. Looking at art history, but more modern things. I absolutely hear what you say about avoiding people who do the same thing as you. And my kind of heroes are probably Jenny Saville and Marlene Dumas, who are, they paint bodies, and there was women, and I'm really interested in the way they handle paint and the way they tackle those big surfaces. And I mean, but the other thing is, if you look at that kind of work, it can just make you want to give up because it's just so big. It's intimidating. But yeah, those are my sort of current heroes.
Okay, just finally, this is a much more general question about art. I'm curious about, and maybe it's a bit too philosophical, but I'm curious about what the level of ownership of a piece of art is, depending on the degree in which the artist is involved. So I'm thinking a little bit of the young British artists, and think particularly of the likes of David Hirst, for instance, and there's again other artists as well, who have added their name to a piece of work, but it hasn't necessarily been created by them. I appreciate this is not a new thing. It's been going on for a very long time. What are your views on that?
It's quite a peculiar thing, really. I mean, I guess you'd have to be quite well known to have that sort of brand and be applying that to work that you haven't even been involved with. But for me, I've got to do the work. It's got to be me that does it. Otherwise, it's not really interesting me. So yeah, if I go to see people's work, I'd like to see what they've done, not what their studios produced. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lindsey. I don't think it's authentic at all. I think it just becomes a money-making business, and it's all about money. And it's not about being creative and doing something that you really feel and it's true to you, which has been talked about, what's specific to us, where, it's pretty eye on the market, isn't it, that's changing and there's a lot of money involved. But then as you see historically, when you look back, and when you look back to women artists in particular as well, a lot of the time the women, when you go back to like Dutch portrait painters, the husbands would be winning down the clients, and the women, the wives and daughters would painting the paintings, and when you look at Rubens, all the teams of people they had working with them, so how much is actually Rubens as well, so that's quite a tricky thing, I think we've kind of moved from that big, I suppose when we go to David Hirst, we've gone back to it again, we used to that big studio, and then it became, from sort of Rubens' time, and especially Dutch painters, it was like more a one-to-one type thing. So, maybe we are shifting back to it, but personally, no, I don't think it's authentic, I don't think it's an authentic response. I think it's down on the market, and so many other artists like them, rather than actually creating something that really is saying something genuine.
I completely agree, because I saw a story relatively recently about some Damien Hirst pieces where they had been misattributed in terms of the year, and they were a lot more new than the date that was actually put on them. And the explanation that he gave, and this apparently is a practice in certain art circles, the explanation he gave was, well, I had the idea in 2007. It doesn't matter if it was sort of realised again in 2018 as another edition.
It's quite depressing to work with artists when you see people like that making so much money, because it's all about the marketing and where they are, when you're working away, working hard to do something, and then, as we've said, to have responses to things and change and try and develop as an artist and have some kind of degree of integrity in what you produce as well, where, it's, but then it might not be that different as we said.
Right, I think integrity is a good point to finish on, ladies, and in particular, I think there's a nice segue between the integrity of the art, the integrity of the structure, the integrity of the compositions that you both create, and they're beautiful to look at. So both of you, thank you very much for sharing your time with us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Rob, just a quick, there's a question from someone who's online. Before I asked that question, I think Greer, Deb and Gaydon say hi from NYC. And we've got a question from Amy. How many hours did the thistle painting, hanging just behind you, take? It's really lovely.
It's hard to kind of work out how many years. I tend to have about 10 paintings on the go at one time. And I jump from different things. I jump from figure to flowers. So probably if I was working on it solidly, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. But I always find it quite a difficult thing to work out, because I try to discipline myself to do an hour or 2 hours of one and then stop, just to keep my eye fresh. So I was thinking about maybe a week to 2 weeks if I'm always going to find hours.
Thank you very much for that question. I think that's actually the first one we've ever had.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could just put your hands together for Greer and for Lindsey. That's good. That was fun.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it went really well. Thank you.
Now you're being attacked by a small dog.
Get used to that.
I think she's a bit old.